All right, it's 6 p.m. Welcome everyone to the Feedbackly webinar on employee experience. Glad to see you joining, and just a few practicalities for the webinar when we get started. Please keep your microphone on mute. It should be on mute when you joined, but just to make sure of that. We have two different ways to post questions during the webinar, and hopefully we get a lot of questions from you guys. Either you can use the YouTube live feed, the chat next to the presentation, or then you can go to feedbackly.com and log into the Feedbackly dashboard if you have credentials, or from our homepage, just use the chat icon in the lower right-hand corner to post your questions. For those of you who might not be able to sit in on the whole session, the webinar will be recorded and shared to you later on also. Good. First of all, thanks for all of you that did actually reply on our pre-webinar survey, where we wanted to find out what you think about employee experience and what it kind of has to do also with customer experience. So just to show you a few numbers, based on your answers, there's a 90% correlation between customer experience and employee experience, which means that these two go really, really hand in hand, based on your opinion. And that's pretty much the reason why we're here today also, to discuss how these two are combined and what things to consider on the employee experience side of things. In addition to the very strong correlation between these two, based on your results, only 59% of you are not yet using any kind of solution to actually measure your employee engagement and your employee experience. So this is something we're gonna discuss today a bit more closely, also how Feedbackly can help you on this front. Other things that good questions and good feedback about things you would like to be gone through today in the webinar is that how can you practically implement these employee experience ideas with Feedbackly? So how does the tool work on that front? What kind of questions you can ask from your employees? We'll have some examples for you guys also on that front, and then also. What is the best channel for distribution of the survey? And this is something we're gonna also have a closer look at during the webinar. So just to highlight a bit about the agenda. So in the invite, we also brought up a few questions that we're gonna answer today, but just to show it here once again, what does employee experience have to do with customer experience? We will take some time on that topic. Why is employee experience important? What happens when you put employee experience and customer experience together? And to top it all off, how you can utilize your Feedbackly to actually achieve that. So if we jump right to the fact that what does CX have to do with employee experience, then we pretty much need to start off by defining that what is customer experience and what is employee experience. Customer experience is about delivering the outcome your customers need to achieve in the way that they want to achieve it across their entire life cycle with you. Comparing that to the employee experience, which is the combination of organizational culture, technological environment, processes, and physical environment that determines how employees perform and feel about their job. So in essence, just by defining these two, we have the keywords of how they feel, how they perform, the entire life cycle on the CX side. So there's a lot of things that are pretty much follow the same structure, the same logic, and we're going to go through those a bit more closely today also. So keeping this in mind, what does it actually mean when you combine these two? So we did some research and found some really interesting facts also on this side. So first of all, Companies with highly engaged employees outperform their competitors by 147%, which is pretty much a huge number if you think about it. So if you have a engaged team, you outperform your competitors, all other things aside. 79% of the employees at companies with above average customer experience are highly engaged in their jobs. So pretty much follows the same logic. If you have engaged your workforce is engaged, you will also perform above average. To top it all off, the growth in operating income over a 12-month period for companies with a highly engaged workforce is 19.2%. You can actually find the sources to these numbers down in the left-hand corner. Some good reads for whoever is interested in this also. Okay. Pretty much the most, let's say, important or biggest fact we actually could find is that companies that invest in employee experience are 4 times more profitable than those who don't. Keeping this in mind with the trend that's going on how to engage your workforce, how to keep them happy. For instance, Richard Branson, who always says that take care of your most important touch point or stakeholder group, that is your own employees, and the rest will follow. All right. So moving on, and when defining the CX and the employee experience EX, and thinking about what does these things have in common, and why does Feedbackly also bring this whole concept of EX and measuring your employee experience? Well, if we think about the customer journey at first, so pretty much how your customers are moving around and in your service, it considers of different phases from awareness to consideration, purchase, delivery, and loyalty, just to name a few, like in a default customer journey. After they pretty much go through a certain phase, they're also go through the so-called loop at the end, which means that they follow a certain process, after which it's like the 360 view of your customer, of your existing customers, that you hope for them also to be recurring customers. And this like basic logic and basic process and steps follows, industry to industry. Of course, when talking about technology industries or service or retail or whatever, they look a bit different. And usually there's a lot of different customer journeys and a lot of different customer touch points based on what you actually do. But like in general, by default, something like this. If we look at the employee experience and the employee life cycle, there's some similarities also in the process and loop thinking that we already have in the customer journey side of things. So it might look, this is something that we are using from the theory. So phases like attraction, recruitment, onboarding, development, retention, and then we have the actual employee loop or the everyday life of the employee. So as we can see here, there's a lot of different touch points to cover, from awareness to loyalty to training, invoicing, upsell, whatever. And also on the employee side, we have the specific process that all new recruits go through, but then also how they are measured and asked, and how the whole experience is measured later on during their actual employment. Everything from weekly questionnaires or surveys to actual training, on-the-job training stuff, and ad hoc and whatnot. We'll have a look at a few examples that are currently being used by our existing customers also. So keeping in mind the idea of the employee life cycle and the customer journey also in a way, how does it all work? So based on the pre-survey questions, we also got some inquiries on which kind of channels to use, what kind of distribution methods for the service work the best, which one gives you the highest response ratio, and so forth. We're gonna, flip the table in a way, and how we like to go through these things is that we don't start off with the actual channel or distribution. That's just a means to an end. So what we like to do at Feedbackly is to first off go through that. What are the prerequisites to actually make you successful in measuring your experiences? So we have a pretty standard 5-point plan for you to actually succeed in your engagement efforts. So starting off by setting up the goals, establishing ownership of the actual service, of the measurement. Then you create the service, you measure them, you distribute them. Then of course you analyze your results. And lastly, the thing that we try to emphasize a lot also is you communicate your results for your employees in this case. So going through them one by one, the goal setting and ownership of the actual thing you're trying to achieve is the one that we recommend and hope you prioritize the most. So before, or let's say, as long as you have an idea and you have the mindset that you actually want to start measuring your employee experience and employee engagement, and you want to ensure that you have the most engaged workforce that there is, that people are proud to work for you, people also communicate back that what things do they need or want to see in order to be able to succeed in their jobs. You need to have some kind of goal set up and establish some kind of ownership also on how to go about the whole thing. So what we usually recommend to do is to take a kind of a reality check of where you are as a company, as a team, and then start thinking about where you want to go from there. So you set up goals that you, for instance, want to have a overall satisfaction level of 75% or more. And that's a good baseline to get started with, for instance. Then you also need to establish ownership, that who actually owns the results, or who actually will utilize the results in order to make sure that you are going towards that goal that you wanted to set up. And if you're actually managing a company with a lot of different teams, a lot of different employees, then also ensure that all the people, both that from whom you're asking and whom are going to do something with the results, are engaged and part of the process from the beginning. So, and to help you with that, of course, you can establish KPIs, because KPIs are still the best way to keep track of where you are going as a company, as a team, but also to look back on what things was done in order to get the results you were looking for. But in order to also succeed when you utilize the employee experience, is that you need to also look beyond just the numbers and just the KPIs and the hard data. It's really important to also give the employees a chance to be heard. You need to understand what motivates them, what is expected of them when they do their job, what should be done. And based on this, you can only start creating your survey content and actually get valuable and in a way pure data that you can then utilize as a part of your strategic measures also. And important to remember is also that if you are going through and measuring the experience of different teams, one size does not fit all anymore. So in a way, depending on what you're measuring, how often, you need to be able to create the survey in a way that, okay, it's measurable between teams, but also that it actually is targeted towards the employees and the teams that you want to engage more in a way. So after you have created your goals and gotten your team engaged in a way, or team managers at least engaged, then it's time to start looking at what are the things you want to measure. Like in all the customer experience surveys and measurements, the key thing is that each question should have bring some kind of value to either the respondent or the team manager. So not just to create questions in the surveys just for the sake of it, in a way. So you want to be able to create as let's say efficient surveys as possible. So there's no minimum or maximum on the amount of questions you should be asking. That it's more of a matter of what is the actual content of the survey, but the less is more in these ones also. Typical things that usually are asked by Feedbackly customers is we are looking at different kind of frequencies in a way, and different kind of actual behaviors and events during the employee lifecycle. The most common here is the weekly HR pulse, which means that you actually reach out to your team each week, for instance, Friday afternoon, and ask them to give feedback on how the last week or how the week went. What was good? What didn't go as well as planned? Did you reach your own goals and so forth? We'll have a look at the example surveys in a minute. On top of that, you can also utilize these biannual employee satisfaction surveys. Usually bigger companies do this already. They send out it twice a year. And the idea is, of course, that if you utilize a HR Pulse weekly survey, it will also support the larger, a bit different focused biannual satisfaction survey. So the challenge with the biannual surveys are usually that they are created by the HR team of a company. They usually measure and ask pretty much everything that's going on with the company. So from how do you see our company's strategy in your daily work, for instance, this kind of high-level questions. And then they go down all the way to how much support do you get on a daily basis when needed. But the idea is that with the help of Feedbackly, it's not to just eliminate these biannual satisfaction surveys that are not as efficient, because usually they are asked from the whole company, which can be thousands and thousands of employees, and then it takes X amount of months to actually go through the results, and then a X amount of months to actually communicate and make the changes on the operational level also. And the issue there is pretty quickly that if the biannual survey is the only way to actually reach out to your employees and see how they're doing, if they're not doing so well, or they have a lot of issues regarding their work that they would need to be able to, that should be able to be fixed, the employees might have already left the company at that point when you actually are able to implement the changes. So pretty much speeding up the frequency or doing it on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, or so forth, will actually help you get to the obstacles and the pain points much faster than only going through this on a biannual basis. And this is like, we're talking about these ongoing surveys. So these are like, you can pretty much schedule them in the calendar. They're in the background all the time. They're really powerful. You get a lot of valuable feedback on a weekly basis from your employees. Of course, you have different kinds of event-based points or touch points in a way, where, for instance, training sessions, when you have you give ongoing training to your employees and you go through them, and then, for instance, during the actual onboarding phase, when you get new employees and you onboard them to your company, you might want to reach out to the employee and ask that, hey, how was it? And just by own words, tell what went well, or what went good, and what could be done differently. We at Feedbackly, actually, we do all of these things with our own team. So we measure weekly, biannually, and also every new employee is encourage to also give a lot of feedback on the actual onboarding process, because that's the only way we can actually know what people are expecting when they join our company. And lastly, the exit service, of course, and this is something that is usually done face-to-face with your closest superior when you leave a company. In some cases, it's not done at all, but it's also a lot of valuable data. Why are you leaving our company? In the same way, with businesses, when your customers churn or they won't, continue the collaboration, to reach out and ask what did we do, or what could we have done better. It provides a lot of valuable information on what to keep in mind to be able to keep the customer also happy. But the same way for the employees. This is just to highlight a few different frequency surveys, and then also like frequent event-based surveys on the side of that. And to answer one of the pre-webinar survey questions, here's just a few examples of what kind of content you can think about adding to these different types of surveys. So I wanted to highlight for instance, difference between the weekly HR pulse and the monthly biannual survey on the setting of the question. As you can see, and on the weekly side, it's a direct question. How was your week? ? And for instance, using a 5-point smiley scale there will give you the mathematical satisfaction, like average satisfaction on your results. So it works really well there. In comparison, the monthly biannual survey, it's more of a statement kind of setup in the survey. So we are providing statements. For instance, my work responsibilities are clear to me. And here you can use the Likert scale. So from I fully agree to I fully disagree. So you want to, once again with the smiley type of question, provide how well on the scale from 1 to 5 you actually agree with the said statement. In addition, of course, just to lift up a few examples, is that these, on top of following the KPIs that we discussed previously, so telling how the week was, did you reach your goals, or getting like numerical data, there's also the fact that when you ask these kinds of things from your employees, you have to ensure that their voice will also be heard in a way. So when you ask questions like, is there something you would need help with from your manager or your team? This is actually reaching out, and when they actually provide you insights in what they would need help with, it's also a straight action point for other team members or the team manager to do something about it. And this provides the value also for the employee, that when you ask these kinds of direct questions, not just like KPIs or rate from 1 to 10 kind of questions, and it also means that you have like the obligation as a manager also to in a way keep your promises, because if your employees give you valuable feedback on how they could, or what kind of help or assistance they need to manage their jobs better, then you also have obligation to reach out to them and make it happen and remove the obstacles. So it works kind of both ways. On top of that, then of course you have different kinds of stakeholders. So there might be like rental workers at your company. So it's not your employees per se, but you might want to treat them as your own. So you can reach out to them, because then once again, when you start asking for recommendation on how likely are you to recommend us to an employee, to a friend, this is where you collect, for future marketing purposes, that, hey, our NPS score for rental workers is 75, which is really good, and you can utilize it for different purposes. And then lastly, also we are utilized pretty heavily also in the actual application process. So as we know today, companies can have really long and really a lot of different phases in the application process. So how are you able to keep track of how you're doing without actually measuring each point, or at least each critical point in the process, with some kind of survey and reaching out, and adding like numerical questions in a way, so to get the clean data and get the satisfaction scores, NPS scores, but also adding the possibility for your employees and people to actually tell them, for them to tell you how they feel. It combines the best of both. So you can actually use it on a strategic level and utilize the KPIs, but then also on an operational level on what needs to be done within my team on a weekly basis to make sure that my team members have the best possible prerequisites to manage and succeed in their work. But like I said, you will get access also to this later on, so we can, or then you can actually go through it and see how it would work for your own processes and own experience measurements. Okay, so when you're set up, of course, you create the survey, and we recommend that you can start off with a few different options, maybe one or two ways to reach out. The HR Weekly Pulse is a good way to get it going on a good enough frequency. So you measure it every week, you get valuable data, and then also a second touch point, which could be some other event that you want to learn more about. So when you have the content created, then of course the next thing is that how will you start measuring it? How will you reach out to your team in order to get the answers to the survey? One of the pre-webinar questions was also about which one would help me the most, which one would give me the highest ratio. We would say that there is not a way to by the technical means or by the selection of channel to actually measure which one works the best if you don't have set up goals on why you're doing this and have been able to communicate to your own team that why we are doing this. So you need to be able to answer your team also that why it's important for them to give you the feedback, and based on that they will also give you happily feedback if they know why they're doing that. And to help you with that, once you have actually communicated that why you're doing that, then when you start thinking about what is the best way to reach out, to distribute the survey, then you can utilize feedback in a number of ways. So you can utilize the kiosk or iPad app that we have, for instance, at the office next to the door. So when people leave for the week or the day, they can on the terminal just post their or give their answers. You can reach out by QR code, but we are a fan of the instant messaging options. So utilize Slack or for instance WhatsApp. If you have group discussions on WhatsApp, you can just post a link there, and then people through that will answer. Because that also, if you distribute the survey in a way that it's not in a way tied down to a specific place or specific time when they give the feedback, then you also get more valuable results. So we recommend that each week, for instance, with the Pulse survey, you send it out on a Friday when the working week is nearing its end, and then people can actually reply to it when they feel suitable to reply to it, which means that they will sit in the bus on their way home, or they will get home and make dinner, and later on in the evening maybe look back on how the week went, and then the actual responses will be much more valuable because they have time to think on what things they want to bring up. So we recommend utilizing the Feedbackly survey link that you distribute, for instance, in WhatsApp or in some cases also email. And we internally here, we use Slack for the same purpose. It works really well here also. Good. Then, of course, when you have distributed the survey, depending on what kind of frequency you're using, so let's say you do it on a weekly basis, then let's say you ask for your team to reply every Friday. That would mean that most of them would reply Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday, and then by the beginning of next week you would have your results from the previous week. So with the dashboard, of course, you can keep track of what kind of results come in. And here's the actual key, that you can instantly react to changes when they arise. So you know that the feedback has come in on Friday or Saturday, for instance, and then you know by Monday, if you don't check them during the weekend, then you know what kind of things happened last week that you actually need to react to and make changes to. So if you're collecting on a weekly basis, for instance, a good way is also to go through it on a weekly basis. So let's talk about the communication in a minute, but then you can take it as a part of your weekly work in a way. So you go through the results each week and know what changes need to be made, and this way you can keep it, up to date. And when your employees see that you make changes based on the feedback, then they will also happily give you feedback because they know that you're going to react on the actual fact also. And of course, if you're collecting from multiple teams, from multiple locations, countries, to segment the survey content, or at least the survey links, in a way that you know which team is responding to which survey, then it gives you a much better comparison also on how the different teams are doing, and compare the results between one another. And of course, if you get a lot of data, you can also use the Feedbackly API, or then also download a CSV or Excel file and export the data to your own master data, provided that you use one of our plans for that. And why are we actually talking about the journey and the touch points and the different kinds of surveys? So this is just to visualize and highlight for you that what it could mean in a way. So when you have different kinds of surveys in different parts of your employee lifecycle, and then you also get results based on a specific part of the process. So for instance, in this case, if we look at attraction, we have an average satisfaction in our attraction survey that is 89%. Depending on your company, I would say that the attraction phase would, of course, be that how well you are found on, for instance, different job portals, different fairs and events where you actually tell about your business or whatnot. How attractive are you as an employer? So getting a score on how likely or how happy people would in a way be to work for you. So that gives you a score on that part of the process. And this is probably something that your marketing team or sales team are really interested in. So how well are we attracting the best talent? How well do people see us, as a future employer? Things like best places to work lists that come out every year. This kind of supports that also. That how are we seen on the market? Of course, because for instance, onboarding phase, which would be the third phase in this made-up process, would mean that the average satisfaction is actually lower, and the NPS score is 62. So in this case, it will once again give for the onboarding team or the HR team a good perspective on how are we doing on the onboarding phase. So once again, it doesn't have to do with the marketing or sales team in the attraction phase. It has to do with the HR team in the onboarding phase. Moving along, of course, then when you measure weekly, for instance, the HR pulse with an average satisfaction of 85, tells you something. Biannual employee satisfaction that is actually broken down into different teams. You can see that, okay, you have an average satisfaction of 69 and an NPS of 37, but when you break it down in teams, you know which teams, feels what way. So in this case, marketing is really happy. The tech team is a bit less happy in this way. So you can actually look at the big picture, but break it down to different parts of your employee life cycle. And this follows pretty much the same thing as the customer journey mapping, which is our bread and butter in a way at Feedbackly. And the last part actually in our simplified 5-step how does this work plan is, of course, to communicate the results. So when you have set up goals, you have set up some kind of benchmarks and baselines on what you want to establish. You have the proper means to start measuring it and get the data for that. Then you also need to communicate within the team and within your company on what kind of things are coming up there, what kind of things needs to be worked on, and for instance, when you communicate the results, let's say on a weekly basis, if you collect on a weekly basis, then you can also create the discussion within your team and together come up with different types of ways to make sure that the issues that arise in the feedback are also taken care of, but also the good practices, the good things are shared amongst the people there. And we have a lot of good results with our customers where they use this like weekly HR pulse, and each weekly meeting or team meeting the next week they go through it. Of course, if it's sensitive feedback, then they won't highlight it for the rest of the team. But of course, just to keep a track of that, hey, last week we had a overall satisfaction of 76%. The week before we had 84. Kind of, what do you guys think? What kind of things was the reason to this big of a drop in the overall satisfaction, and so forth. So going through as frequently as you're measuring will actually keep it up to date all the time, and it creates the positive spiral also for employees to give feedback when they know that things are not happening in 6 or 9 months. They're happening next week based on the things that they bring up. So in summary, so how do you go about this? You set up your goals, create your surveys in the Feedbackly dashboard really quickly. You publish them in the channel you think will reach your employees the best. And like I said, we recommend you use the survey link channel type, because that's the link that will not be changing, and you can distribute it in the ways depending on how you communicate internally with your team on a daily basis. So email, Slack, WhatsApp, Facebook groups, whatever comes to mind. And of course, frequent feedback helps you make decisions in the teams faster. So once again, the more often you measure, the more often you react to them, it creates a positive spiral, a positive loop on things also that to consider and make sure that your business starts standing out more and more. And lastly, one big thing, especially in Finland, the home country of Feedbackly, is that we're not the biggest fan of talking. So when you give your employees a way to actually present new ideas in writing and anonymous feedback, you actually usually you will get a lot of really valuable insight in things that people see that could be done or is not working. So the loudest ones are not necessarily always right. So embrace them, your employees, to contribute and to their own well-being and to doing things together and create a great place to work. Yes. In conclusion, before we go to some of your questions, we have received several of them. First of all, in conclusion, so take care of your employees and they will take care of your customers. So if you give them a chance to give you constant feedback on how they're doing, what could be done differently, what is working well, it creates the positive spiral. It creates an atmosphere of, hey, I'm really, my opinions matter, what I have to say and what I want to do is really something that the company wants to take care of me. And then when you actually tie that to the fact that the customer experience is just as good as your employee experience, and you make the customer experience, for instance, a goal for the employees to work towards to, then you pretty much have combined both of these. So because you are establishing a customer experience centric organization or team, and you have happy employees, they pretty much go hand in hand all the way. And just a few ideas also, because when you set up different kinds of customer experience metrics for your team, so for instance, the overall satisfaction of the customer, the NPS score that you get from your customers, and you pretty much engage your employees also to work towards making those goals on the KPIs you set up, then they know that, okay, this is what is expected of me, and in order for me to be able to reach these goals, I need these things to be happy and be engaged also, which you then again, of course, measure from the employee experience side of things. And it's a well-known fact that when employees know how their work impacts the company, they're inspired also to produce better customer experience. And before going to the questions, I'm going to leave you all with a thought that comes from the law of congruent experience, something we found last week, really interesting read. Employees will deliver a customer experience that matches their own experience in the organization. So here is the outmost connection between customer experience and employee experience. Good. So how does it work with Feedbackly? Of course, we had some questions regarding that. Is this a added-on service with a different pricing? No, it's included in your plan. So whether you use a free plan, a growth plan, or enterprise or whatever, it's included because it's only, I wouldn't say only, it's a part of the offering. You can create as many HR or employee experience service you want to. The only thing is the feedback limit. So if you face issues with the feedback limits or specific features, please contact us and we'll make sure that you have the right package in use to be able to also start using this for employee experience. And the best way to reach us is, of course, through the chat, either in the dashboard, or for you guys that don't utilize Feedbackly yet, you can also utilize the chat on our website and we'll help you from there. Okay, good. We have a few minutes for questions. Let's see just a second what kind of questions have come in. First question is, do you provide consultation on CX and employee experience? So yes, we do. We have the self-sign-up plans, as you know, but then we also have the enterprise plans for customers that want the consultation thing. If you're interested in how Feedbackly and the team can help you with the CX and EX consultation, you can contact us at info@feedbackly.com and just provide some details about your case, and we will get back to you on how we can help you on that. We will also provide these same instructions for you later on. Okay, so the second question. Hi there, thanks for the tips. Sound useful. Thank you very much. I'm already using Feedbackly for other purposes, so do I need to get a different license to collect feedback from employee as well? This is from Jennina. Thanks. No, Jennina, you don't need to change your plan. But like I just said, if you're reaching your feedback limits or you want additional features to your package, then we might need to upgrade you. But no other restrictions apply. Okay, how often should I survey my employees? Well, jumping back a bit in the presentation, it's pretty much a matter of what are you trying to achieve in a way. So if we look at the employee life cycle, you might want to measure it weekly, but then of course you need to be able to on a weekly basis also generate action points based on the feedback. So I would say that, or we would recommend that you measure as often as you're able to actually do something about the things that come up. So how as often as you're able to react on the feedback. There is not really a limitation on team sizes or something that would go hand in hand with this. I would say that on a operational level with engaged team managers, you should do this on a weekly basis, because then the employees could tell on a week to week basis what is on their mind. Good question. Can the responses be anonymous? We actually recommend that you strive for anonymity from the beginning. And this way you create the atmosphere in the team that anything that comes to mind can be shared. Of course, in the feedback dashboard, you have the option to then in the results also hide, for instance, open feedback that is really sensitive, or that is something that you don't want to share with the rest of the team. So if you utilize the employee experience in the same way as the customer experience service, that you create, for instance, a weekly report every week that you want to share with your team, then you can also, from the results tab, you can hide specific questions and specific feedback that won't be shown on the report before you send it out. But we, of course, like I said, anonymity is better than actually, than asking for who gives the feedback. But of course, if it's small teams, you might know who gives the feedback, but it doesn't matter. The most important thing is that you actually give everyone an option to share what they think and feel. And lastly, how advanced companies are usually in measuring their employee experience. So if I'm reading this one correctly, is there space to get competitive advantage by being active in employee experience? From our understanding, companies are not that advanced. In a way, yes, if we talk about the biannual surveys, so that's something that a lot of companies do. So they send out the biannual, the long survey, which may include 50 to 60 different survey questions, and they measure it biannually. And then they go through the results for a few months, and then they create action points, and then they implement them. So it might take 4 to 5 months to actually do something about the feedback they get biannually. And when they actually start reacting on the feedback they get from their employees, they're already in the second or the next biannual satisfaction cycle, which means that they're lagging behind all the time. On a weekly basis, so for instance, like we've been discussing in the webinar, we're seeing more and more of it, both from small teams, but also from like publicly listed teams, global teams, or global companies that really want to make the engaged employee one of the ways to in a way not come out from the competitors. Okay, what's the best way to ensure that your employees feel like their feedback is being heard? The best process to communicate the results to your employees. I think this is a matter of how you manage, what kind of culture you are aiming to implement in your company. But in all its simplicity and effectiveness, I would say that as part of like weekly meetings that you might have to go through what kinds of things was talked about last week, what was the overall satisfaction the previous week, and maybe highlight the few things that rose up there, what went well, could be worked on. I think it's just a matter of keeping it simple, keeping it the way that your employee would want to hear it in a way. So they're giving you personal feedback, then you also need to have the human touch and go through it, more than just numbers, but also that, okay, this is the way we want to help you guys succeed for the upcoming week. And these are the things that were challenges last week. Okay, good. Really good questions, thank you. Then we also have a question regarding talks of customer experience. We'd love to talk more about the customer experience with you. This webinar was more about the actual employee experience, but sometime after the year switches, we will also have a webinar about the customer journey as one theme. But of course, if you want to discuss more closely the CX side of things, which I understand really well, you can send us actually your contact information, or we can actually reach out to you on the YouTube chat also to make an appointment to discuss it more closely. Good. Lastly, because approximately 40% of at least the people that were answering the pre-webinar survey are not using Feedbackly yet, I'm just gonna say a few words for you guys that don't know about us more closely. So Feedbackly is a company that's founded in 2012. It's a Finnish company, and our CEO is the only person that made it to the CX 30 under 30 list this year, with the likes of people from, for instance, Facebook. Our headquarters are in Helsinki, and we have branch offices also in Spain, Mexico, and Australia. We are, or here's some numbers actually on what we're helping our customers at the time. So approximately 500,000 feedbacks are collected each month. We're used in over 500 cities across the globe, and we have over 4,000 users also on our platform. And lastly, the thing we want to do is to create sustainable growth through CX data, which also includes the employee experience, because as we've been discussing today, a lot of the things that lead to great customer experience is actually taking care of your own at first, which means being able to give your own employees also a voice, react on things, and utilize that towards better and better customer experiences. Okay, that's about it for now. Thank you everyone who were listening today. Hopefully you got some good ideas, and like I said, we will also record the webinar. We will actually send it out to you guys later on with the addition of the questions that we just went through. And if you have any questions, please contact us through the chat, or then you can also send us mail to info@feedbackly.com, and we'll go from there. Okay, thank you guys, and have a great week.